Conversation with the Candidate continues right now.
Welcome back to our conversation with the candidate and our candidate, Republican Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas. We're going to have lots of questions from our town hall studio audience here. I might jump in with a follow-up or two. And of course, we have some online questions coming in, but let's get right into things with Christy Prosser.
Good evening, Governor. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you, Christy.
Thank you. My question for you, as a 28-year educator, my question is, if you were elected president, what would you do to make schools a safer place to learn?
Well, thank you. And that's the number one responsibility that we have is, first of all, to make sure our schools are safe. And of course, I thought you were going to lead into what we're going to do to improve education overall. And I could answer that, but the safety is the fundamental principle. And so I led a national study on how to make our schools safer. And that was an important study that I brought in former Secret Service, I brought in federal law enforcement, as well as educators. And we did a report called the National School Shield Initiative, and it talked about making our schools safer. And part of it is having school resource officers. I believe that's important, trained officers there, and that they are ready to respond. Secondly, you need to have a capability within the school to respond to threats. And that is having a toll-free number, or it's some means of people expressing a concern and a response to it. And it could be a mental health crisis on a student or a threat from outside. So the response capability in terms of the threats is important. And then the physical structure of the school. Now, all of this, which means that you have to design schools to be safe. And all of that takes money. And so in Arkansas, we put extra money in to help the schools in terms of the security and required them to have a security plan, a safety plan, as well as some of these different elements that I mentioned. The federal government can help some. Primarily, that's a state and local responsibility. But let's keep our children safe, and that's fundamentally the critical role that we have as parents and as school officials.
Thank you, Governor.
Quick follow for you, Governor. Do guns play a role in that at all? Any kind of gun control legislation?
Well, let's put it in perspective. I've always, whenever you see a shooting, whether it's in a school or whether it's in a business, and we've seen both, obviously, it breaks my heart. And in every one of those, I think, what more should we do? What should be changed? And what would be effective? And the fundamental question is, what is effective? And many of the solutions that are put out there in terms of gun control is not effective in terms of safety. And but whenever there is a gap, like last year, they had the bipartisan bill that Senator Cornyn from Texas and Senator Murphy of New Jersey led, that closed a gap for some of the background checks to detect either a mental illness or a juvenile record. And so those are the kind of things you can come together, say this makes a difference, and that was after the Uvalde shooting. But I'm a Second Amendment person. I do believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the Constitution. I come from a state that that obviously is important as well. And so I look at the safety side, the mental health side, and then, if there's other solutions that make sense and that will make a difference, they should always be something we looked at consistent with our Constitution.
Next question from Carolyn Morrill.
Hi, welcome to New Hampshire.
Thank you, Carolyn.
As you know, the U.S. has a lot of problems to solve. So I'd like to know, what are your ideas or thoughts on how to achieve energy independency?
Well, thank you for that. And that's probably one of the most important questions that pertain to both our economy as well as to the cost of the goods in the store. And that is our energy production in the United States of America. And so the first thing that I want to do, and I say one of my priorities, is to have a pro-growth energy policy in the United States of America. And that means that you have to produce energy, and that production of energy needs to be from a variety of sources so it's reliable, dependable, and affordable for our American citizens. We don't want to be dependent on other countries. We don't want our president going to Saudi Arabia and say, please, can you produce more oil? We don't want to go to Venezuela, where our president is saying, can you help us out? These are not our friendly nations necessarily. And so we've got to produce and be independent. That is the most important. But it's also about growth. We don't want to stymie the growth in our country by limiting our supply of energy. So I am for that. Obviously, you sort of overlay that, well, let's do it in the most environmentally sensitive way possible, but let's produce energy that is critical for New Hampshire, it's critical for our nation. And let me just add one thing, unrelated to that, but I'm very proud to be in New Hampshire, and I fully support New Hampshire's first in the nation primary. I look forward to being here. I'm going to be here often, and we'll be talking about energy.
Thank you.
We don't have oil in the ground, but we do have voters. So. All right. Nancy Keene is up next.
Hi, I have another education question. Since you said you had more to say about education, this is perfect. What do you think that the federal government can do to improve the accessibility, quality, and affordability of education for all individuals, regardless of their socioeconomic background or geographic location?
A great question. And first of all, the responsibilities with state and our local government. But as a governor, for example, whenever we was the first state in the nation to require computer science to be taught in every high school, we made sure that we had the funding in place to assist our rural schools so that we just didn't put it in our urban areas, but we also made sure that our students had access to the highest level of learning in computer science in all of our rural places in Arkansas. So it starts with that principle of equity. I grew up in a small town of 1,000, Gravette, and on the farm off the Spavinaw Creek, and I loved growing up there, but it was a rural school. And I always thought of Gravette whenever I put in policy. Well, as president, when we put in policy, we want to think about all of America and how this impacts them, and to make sure that whatever your zip code is, you're going to have quality education. And so that's a start. Computer science, we went from 1,100 students in Arkansas taking computer science when I became governor. 1,100. Today we have over 23,000 taking computer science. And that gives them the opportunities that they never had before. And I tell them that you can be from the smallest town in New Hampshire, and if you've got access to high-speed internet and you know computer coding, you can run the world from the front porch of your hometown. And to me, that's opportunity, that's job creation, but it's also quality of life. Education, we could go on for that. We got to pay our teachers more. We've increased the teacher salaries in Arkansas. We got to value our teachers because they make all the difference to our students. And from a federal education standpoint, I want to put priority on making sure we can compete with China when it comes to sciences and math and education. And so I'll put a priority on that, not neglecting the rest of education and the fundamentals of it, but we've got to compete. When I started as governor again, we had 10% of the U.S. high schools, 10% that offered computer science. Today, it's 55%, I believe it is, 55% that offer computer science. That means 45% of our high schools don't even offer it. We want to make that comprehensive across the country. That's leadership driven by the states, but the president could really lead in that competition area that we need with China.
Okay, thank you.
Next question comes from online, and Clara Monier asks, what do you consider your major accomplishments as governor of Arkansas?
Well, you got me on that last part. When you said major accomplishments, I thought more broadly than that. And I was United States Attorney and a very young U.S. Attorney, and whenever I put on a flak jacket and helped negotiate the surrender of a white supremacist group in the northern hills of Arkansas, that was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for our country at the time. But as governor, lowered taxes, where I took $700 million a year from the government coffers and put it into the hands of private taxpayers. We reduced taxes from 7% down to 4.9%. We're trying to get as good as New Hampshire on this tax business. but we made tremendous progress in lowering taxes, improving education, raising teacher pay, supporting law enforcement, giving every certified law enforcement officer in the state of Arkansas, municipal or county, we gave them a $5,000 bonus just to say thank you for keeping us safe. And then we made government more efficient. I reorganized government from 42 different departments that reported to me down to 15. We reduced state government employment by 3,000 workers. That's a 14% reduction. And as president, I want to reduce federal non-defense employment by 10%. That tightens the belt. It helps us to control spending, and that's something that I learned and did as governor. We balanced the budget for 8 years in a row. That's what governors do. Those are a couple things that highlights as governor.
Next question comes from Joan Whitworth.
Good evening. On your campaign website, you say, we must reform our tax code nationally and lower taxes. Could you give us some specific examples of the changes you would like to make? And given the escalating national debt problem, how would you compensate for the presumably reduced tax revenues?
Well, I probably need to look at our website because we might need to correct that, actually. No, we're not going to raise taxes. We need to have, again, a tax policy that is fair for our citizens, that is something that is voluntary for our citizens. That was the whole design of our tax system, and it's sufficient to fund our government. And so I'm not going to raise taxes, and we're going to have a fair tax system. There might have to be some adjustments. We're going to have a renewal of the tax cuts that happened during the Trump administration coming up. Those should be renewed, so you're not raising it. But if there has to be some adjustments in there to be more fair, we will do that. And so that's my pledge. Let's look for growth, let's look for fairness, and let's look for making sure that we don't increase the taxes on Americans.
Thank you.
Follow-up, Governor. A lot of candidates are on board with abolishing the IRS these days. Do you agree with that?
You know, they want to abolish the Department of Education. They want to abolish IRS. They want to abolish just about everything. You know, I'm pretty practical and think through these issues. And for example, the IRS, I think you ought to take $80 billion that was devoted to enhancing the IRS. We can use that on border security. We can use that in a whole host of other ways. And I was glad the budget deal that's still in the works included cutting back on some of that investment with the IRS. So I'm not we got to have a tax system. We have to have audits in our tax system, and we have to go after cheaters in our tax system as well. If I remember right, Al Capone went down for cheating on his taxes. So it's a tool. It's necessary. So I want to make sure that we're fair in our tax collections, but also that the tax collections are not something that's ever weaponized, that's ever used as a political tool going after conservatives or somebody else we might disagree with. That should be abhorrent in government, and so have controls on it. That's what I would advocate.
Next question from Marie Mulroy.
Yes, hi, how are you? Thank you for taking my question. There was a recent article in New York Magazine's Intelligencer that said that you were the ideal candidate for a GOP party that no longer exists. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying I believe that GOP still exists, that believes in limited government, that believes in opportunity for everyone, that believes in individual responsibility, and that believes in America being strong and free and a leader of the world, the free world. To me, that is the Republican Party. Now, that should be the future of the Republican Party. That should be the principles that define us. And if that's out of vogue, then I want to correct our future. I want to go the right direction in the future based upon those principles. And so I think I am the ideal candidate. And there was another story that said I'm the candidate the Democrats fear the most because I can attract independents and suburban voters in a fall election. And we have to be the party of principle, the future, optimism, and a party that represents our national character. And I talk about we need a president that brings out the best of America. And that's not just a catchphrase. I think that's a critical element of being president, that you bring out the best of our freedoms, of our responsibilities, of our national character. And I think we've veered away from that. I want the world to see America as the example of freedom and the lighthouse of freedom in this world. And I'm afraid we've diminished that lighthouse in recent years. So that, to me, is a Republican and the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Leonard Morrill has our next question.
Thank you for taking my question. As president, how will you approach solving issues without using executive orders?
Well, you've got to work with Congress. And first of all, you know, I probably use an executive order to revoke some of Biden's executive orders. So it is a necessary tool, but you're sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And the Constitution gives a check and balance in our system of government, and not all power to the executive branch. I recognize that as governor. Let me tell you, the legislature taught me that every day, that they are an equal branch of government. And we sometimes have friction, but it's good friction. And that's the way our founding fathers designed it. And so I don't want to use an executive order to circumvent or to subvert the will of Congress and to go around them. I want to work with them. That's how you do it. Now, I'm going to assert executive leadership every chance I get, because I believe in the importance of the executive branch and the power of that. But no, there should be a limitation on the use of executive power or executive action, whether it's the Trump administration, the Biden administration, or the Hutchinson administration. And the courts remind us of that from time to time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a question for you, Governor. So you served at the DEA, you've been a prosecutor. I'm curious about your perspective over the long term. Do you think that the war on drugs, as conceived by the Reagan administration, has been a success or a failure?
Well, first of all, I don't like the term war on drugs. It's whenever you're in a family that struggles with drug dependency, I don't think it's a war. I think it's a fight against addiction. I think it's a fight against the poor instincts sometimes in our society. And so you have to be smart as to how you address it. So I don't like that term. Secondly, there's some tools that were put into place during the Reagan administration while I was United States Attorney that has to be revised and corrected. We learned some things. One of them was some of the unfairness in the mandatory minimum sentences on crack versus powder cocaine. And so that's one of the things I advocated to change when I was head of the DEA. And Congress has responded to that with some correction. And so let's have a balanced view on where we are. Now, whenever it comes to the fight against illegal drugs and addiction in our society, law enforcement plays a critical role. I believe in treatment. I believe in addiction counseling, but there's so many that go into counseling because they first met a law enforcement officer and said, you've got a problem. And to avoid penalties, they will go into treatment. That's a good thing. That's why we believe in alternative sentencing for those with addiction problems, but a criminal problem as well. Drug courts is something that I pushed as head of the DEA. And so it's a counseling. When it comes to fentanyl, one of our most serious challenges today, we've all seen some of the heartache from that. It's about prevention. It's about education and making sure our young people know the risk and our young adults know the risk of buying a pill on the street. You know, you can buy a Percocet pill on the street and think you get Percocet, but it's laced with fentanyl. And so prevention, education, counseling, addiction counseling is an important part of it. And then finally, it is going after the source of supply. Whenever the cartels are bringing in, I hear you, Ed. I see you.
I'm coming in.
Whenever the cartels, I'll move closer to you, are bringing in that fentanyl, we've got to be able to designate them foreign terrorist organization, make them a target to prevent that supply coming in.
That's all the time we have for television, Governor.
goodness.
We appreciate it. Went fast, didn't it? But
thank
this
you.
conversation will continue online. You can keep watching this on our mobile app and our website for another 30 minutes. But thank you to those who are watching. Thank you to Governor Hutchinson, and thank you to our audience. Have a good night.
Thank you.